Maria had lived her entire life in service to others, her days defined by the rhythm of cleaning, sweeping, dusting, scrubbing, and polishing. Her hands, rough and calloused, told the story of years spent bending over floors and counters, making other people's homes sparkle while her own dreams remained tucked quietly away. Yet in the quiet corners of her small, humble house, the heart of Maria pulsed with a vision that refused to fade. From the moment she was a little girl, she remembered her father's words, spoken with a mixture of pride and longing. "One day, Maria, I want a farm, a place where the earth is ours and we can breathe freely. It's a dream, yes, but dreams are meant to guide us." She had memorized the cadence of his voice, the way his eyes glimmered with hope whenever he spoke of open fields of livestock grazing in the golden sun of a modest house where laughter and rest would fill the rooms. When her father passed, Maria inherited not only his love and memories but the dream he could never realize. She carried it like a fragile flame, careful not to let life's daily burdens extinguish it. Every night, after her cleaning jobs were done and the world outside grew quiet, she would sit by the small kitchen window of their tiny apartment, hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, and imagine that farm. She pictured the rich, dark soil under her fingers, the smell of hay in the air, and the satisfaction of knowing she had fulfilled her father's lifelong wish. Despite the exhaustion of her work and the modesty of her income, Maria refused to let practicality snuff out hope. She scrimped and saved, counting every coin, careful not to let herself believe the dream was unattainable. But hope, as it often does, needed an opening, a sign that it could take shape in the real world. One late morning, as she was walking through a nearby town to deliver cleaning supplies to a client, Maria's eyes caught sight of a weathered sign swaying gently in the breeze. "Farm for sale." The words seemed to glow, as if the universe itself had aligned to answer her silent prayers. Her heart skipped a beat. Could this truly be the opportunity she had been waiting for? She stood there for several long moments, staring at the sign, her mind racing with both fear and anticipation. "What if it's too expensive?" she thought. "What if they laugh at me?" But then her father's words echoed in her mind. "Dreams are meant to guide us." And in that instant, she knew she could not let fear dictate her choices. Determination surged through her. She would go to that farm. She would speak to the owner, negotiate, and, if she could muster the courage, make an offer. Maria tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, tightened her grip on the strap of her bag, and took a deep breath. This was the first step, the moment where hope met action. The journey would not be easy, and she did not yet know the trials ahead. But for the first time in a long while, Maria felt a surge of confidence. As she walked toward the farmhouse in the distance, she whispered to herself, "For you, Papa, I will make this dream come true." And with every step, the image of her father smiling in the sunlight of that farm strengthened her resolve, carrying her forward toward a destiny that demanded courage, resilience, and unwavering hope. The farm lay before Maria, like a painting she had carried in her heart for years. The sun was just beginning to crest over the horizon, spilling golden light across rolling fields of wheat and tall grass that swayed in the gentle morning breeze. The farmhouse, weathered but sturdy, stood proudly amid the expanse, a symbol of life built from hard work and patience. Maria's chest tightened with a mix of anticipation and fear. This was the moment she had dreamed about her entire life. But reality, she knew, often had a crueler script than dreams. She adjusted the strap of her bag and took a slow, steadying breath. Her shoes crunched softly against the gravel road as she approached the gate, each step echoing in her mind like a drumbeat of destiny. She rehearsed the words she would say, the polite but firm tone she would maintain. "Good morning, sir," she whispered to herself. "I'm Maria. I'd like to talk about your farm." But no amount of rehearsal could prepare her for the sight of him. The farmer emerged from the porch, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a sharp jaw and a gaze that seemed to pierce right through her. His expression was unreadable at first, but the moment he saw her approach, it twisted into something cruel, a smirk that promised ridicule. "A cleaning lady," he said, his voice dripping with mockery, "wants to buy my farm." His words carried over the fields, drawing the attention of the farmhands and laborers. They began to gather, curious, whispering among themselves, eyes alight with amusement. Maria felt her stomach tighten, her palms sweating. She had expected a negotiation, a test of skill and courage, but not this spectacle. She tried to steady her voice, keeping it polite but firm. "Yes, sir. I've come because I—" The farmer cut her off with a laugh, loud and cruel, echoing across the yard. "You? Buy a farm? You barely have enough to pay for your morning bread." His employees laughed, some pointing, some shaking their heads, as if witnessing a private joke at her expense. Maria's cheeks burned, but she stood her ground, refusing to let the fear she felt show. "Please, sir," she said softly. "I've saved for years, and Years," he sneered. "Years of cleaning other people as filth won, to make you rich enough to touch my property." He stepped closer, the shadow of his presence looming over her like a dark cloud. The farmhands chuckled, whispering and nudging each other. Maria felt a mix of humiliation and anger rising inside her, but she refused to retreat. "I'm serious," she said, her voice trembling yet steady. "This farm means a lot to me. It's my father's dream. I only want the chance to make it a home for him, even though he isn't here anymore." The farmer's laugh turned sharp, venomous. "A sentimental little cleaning lady thinking she can buy a farm? Pathetic." He suddenly grabbed a whip, cracking it menacingly in the air. "Get off my land!" he barked. The farmhands scattered, but some stayed, wide-eyed, to witness what came next. Before Maria could react, he struck her back 3 times. Each lash seared her skin, each strike a thunderclap of humiliation and pain. She stumbled forward, tears springing to her eyes, not just from the pain, but from the crushing weight of being mocked and beaten for daring to dream. Finally, he shoved her toward the gate. "Leave, and never come back, or next time it will be worse." Maria stumbled out, clutching her back, her body trembling, her dignity shattered. The fields she had imagined walking freely across only minutes ago now felt like a cruel mirage, mocking her helplessness. Yet, even in the midst of her agony, a small ember of defiance glowed inside her. She would not let this cruelty define her. She would survive this humiliation, and somehow she would find a way to reclaim what was taken from her. As she limped down the gravel road, tears mingling with the morning dew, she whispered through the pain, "This is not the end. It cannot be." Maria returned home that evening, her body aching, her back stinging with the memory of the farmer's cruel lash. She kept her head down, afraid her neighbors, or even her own heart, would betray the shame she felt. The small apartment smelled faintly of the stew she had prepared earlier, now cold on the stove. She sank into a chair, her hands shaking as she tried to soothe the pain, both physical and emotional. Her son, Alejandro, returned home later that night. He was a striking figure, tall and sharply dressed, with eyes that seemed to see more than just appearances. Renowned in legal circles for his skill and unyielding pursuit of justice, Alejandro had always admired his mother's resilience, but that night he immediately sensed something was wrong. "Mother," he said gently, kneeling beside her, "what happened? You look hurt." Maria's pride fought her instinct to tell him. She lowered her eyes. "It's nothing," she whispered, forcing a small smile. "Just nothing." Alejandro, however, was not easily dismissed. He reached out, taking her hands in his. "Do not lie to me, Maria. I can see it. Tell me." The words spilled out, trembling at first, then with more force. Maria told him about the farm, the meeting, the mockery, the cruel laughter of the farmer and his employees, and finally, the whip. Tears streamed down her face as she recounted the ordeal, each detail a fresh pang in her heart. Alejandro's expression darkened. His jaw clenched, and a cold fury replaced the worry in his eyes. "He will regret this," he said, his voice low and dangerous, every word a promise. "No one treats my mother this way and escapes justice." Maria shook her head, overwhelmed by shame. "Alejandro, it's done. I can't go back, and I have no power against him. Please, don't get involved." But Alejandro's resolve was unwavering. He had seen enough injustice in his career to recognize cruelty when it masqueraded as authority. "Mother," he said firmly. This is not just about money. It's about dignity. About standing up for yourself. And for everyone who might suffer because of his cruelty. The next day, Alejandro began the work of preparing a case. He gathered witnesses, took photographs of Maria's injuries, and documented the humiliating testimony of the farmhands who had seen everything. Some had been too frightened to speak at the time, but Alejandro's reputation and moral clarity inspired them to come forward. He filed a lawsuit against the farmer, citing assault, public humiliation, and emotional damages. The legal notice arrived at the farmhouse, delivered by hand. The farmer, once confident in his wealth and status, laughed at the piece of paper, mocking what he assumed would be an easy victory. But Alejandro's preparation was meticulous, his arguments precise, and his determination unshakable. For Maria, the fear and shame began to mix with a fragile hope. She watched Alejandro in action, the calm storm of his mind at work, and felt a renewed sense of purpose. She realized that she did not have to endure this humiliation in silence, that her pain could be transformed into justice. That night, she placed a hand on Alejandro's shoulder. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I never imagined someone could fight so fiercely. For me." Alejandro smiled, a mix of pride and determination in his eyes. "Mother, I will see this through. We will reclaim what was stolen from you, not just the farm, but your dignity." And in that moment, Maria felt the first true flicker of hope since the cruelty of that morning, a hope that would soon blaze into triumph. The morning of the trial arrived with a chill in the air, the kind that made Maria's nerves tingle even before she stepped into the courthouse. She had spent sleepless nights wondering what the outcome would be, but she walked beside her son Alejandro with a newfound courage. His presence was a shield, his calm determination a balm for her bruised spirit. The courtroom was packed. Whispers fluttered across the room as spectators, journalists, and even some farm employees who had witnessed the incident took their seats. At the front, the farmer sat with a smug expression, confident in his wealth, his social status, and the fear he had instilled in others. But Alejandro's sharp eyes never wavered from him, noting every twitch of his hand, every nervous glance. The trial began, and Alejandro rose to present his case. His voice was steady, controlled, yet powerful, resonating through the room. "Your Honor," he began, "we are here not merely to discuss property or finances. We are here to recognize a fundamental truth, that no person, regardless of their wealth or position, has the right to humiliate, injure, or abuse another human being." He called Maria to the stand. She walked forward, her back still sore, but her head held high. Alejandro's gaze met hers, silently encouraging her to speak. The farmer sneered, clearly expecting her to crumble under pressure. Maria took a deep breath. "I came to this farm with hope," she said, her voice steady but edged with emotion. "I came to speak with the owner about purchasing the property, a dream I inherited from my father. Instead of being met with respect, I was mocked, humiliated, and beaten. I was struck 3 times with a whip in front of his employees, and expelled from the land I had hoped to call my own." A hush fell over the courtroom. Even the farmhands, who had initially watched in silence, leaned forward as if finally able to acknowledge what had happened. Alejandro presented the photographs of her injuries, the written testimonies of the witnesses, and the timeline of events with unflinching clarity. When it was the farmer's turn to speak, he tried to maintain his composure, but the first cracks were visible. He claimed that Maria had provoked him, that she overstepped her place, but his words fell flat. Alejandro's cross-examination was precise, exposing each lie, each excuse, and each attempt to evade responsibility. "Sir," Alejandro said sharply, leaning forward, "tell the court, do you believe that power, wealth, or status permits you to strike someone simply for daring to dream?" The question hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The farmer's face reddened. He stammered, tried to argue, but Alejandro's logic and moral clarity were relentless. Witness after witness corroborated Maria's story. The room, once filled with whispers and doubt, now leaned toward justice. Finally, the judge, an older man with a reputation for fairness, reviewed the evidence, listened to the arguments, and considered the testimonies. He turned toward the farmer. "It is the judgment of this court," he said, his voice deliberate and commanding, "that the defendant is liable for assault, public humiliation, and emotional distress. The plaintiff, Maria, is to receive substantial damages for the harm inflicted upon her." A stunned silence followed. The farmer's face drained of color, his confidence shattered. For the first time, he realized the weight of his actions, not just the financial repercussions, but the moral reckoning. He had underestimated the power of justice, of courage, and of a son's fierce loyalty. Maria felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they were not tears of shame. They were tears of relief, vindication, and a hard-won triumph. Alejandro squeezed her hand, sharing in the moment. A silent acknowledgement of the battle fought and won. That night, as they left the courthouse, Maria looked at her son with a mixture of pride and awe. "You've made me believe in justice again," she whispered. Alejandro smiled, placing a protective arm around her. "No, Mother. You made me believe in your courage. I only helped the world see it." And for the first time since that morning on the farm, Maria allowed herself to imagine stepping onto that land, not as a beggar or intruder, but as the rightful owner of her father's dream. The morning sun spilled over the horizon, painting the fields in a golden glow. Maria stood at the edge of the farm, her hands resting on the gate, taking in the sight she had longed for her entire life. The wheat swayed gently in the breeze, the farmhouse stood proud, and the smell of fresh earth filled the air. This time, however, she was not an intruder. She was the rightful owner. The court had delivered justice, and with the compensation she had received, Maria had made the purchase. Every coin she had saved, every bit of courage she had mustered, and the fierce advocacy of her son had culminated in this moment. The humiliation she had suffered at the hands of the cruel farmer was now a distant memory, transformed into a testament to resilience, courage, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. Alejandro walked beside her, his hand brushing hers as they entered the farmhouse together. "It's ours, Mother," he said, smiling. "You did this." Maria shook her head, her eyes glistening. "No, Alejandro. We did this. You fought for me when I felt powerless. But I will make this farm everything my father dreamed it could be." She ran her fingers along the wooden counter in the kitchen, imagining the meals her father would have loved to cook there, the laughter that would fill the house, and the quiet moments of peace under the wide open sky. For years she had dreamed of this place, but now it was more than a dream. It was real, alive, and hers. The fields awaited her care. She walked among the crops, feeling the soil between her fingers, planting seeds of hope and determination, just as she had planted the seeds of courage in herself. She could hear her father's voice in the rustle of the wheat, urging her forward. "This is your gift, Maria. You made it happen." Word of the farmer's defeat spread quickly. Once arrogant and cruel, he became a cautionary tale of how pride and cruelty are eventually met with consequences. Maria did not gloat. She did not seek revenge. Instead, she focused on what truly mattered, turning this farm into a home, a legacy, and a symbol of triumph over adversity. Days turned into weeks, and the farm slowly came to life under Maria's care. Chickens clucked in the yard, the garden blossomed, and she could almost hear her father's laughter echoing across the fields. She had faced humiliation, pain, and doubt, but she had emerged victorious, not just in court, but in reclaiming her dignity and fulfilling a promise she had made to the man who had taught her to dream. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a brilliant shade of crimson, Maria stood at the top of a small hill overlooking her land. Alejandro stood beside her, silent in shared satisfaction. For the first time in her life, Maria felt truly at peace. "This is just the beginning," she said softly. "But now the dream is ours." And with that, Maria stepped forward, her heart full, her spirit unbroken, and her father's dream finally alive in her hands. Years had passed since Maria first stepped onto the farm, a place that had once been only a dream whispered in the quiet of her tiny apartment. Now, the land thrived under her care. Golden fields stretched as far as the eye could see, Orchards bore fruit, and animals roamed freely. The farmhouse had been restored, each room filled with warmth, laughter, and the memories of a dream finally realized. Maria often walked through the fields in the early morning, the soft earth under her boots grounding her, reminding her of how far she had come. She thought of the humiliation she had endured, the laughter, the whip, the cruel dismissal of her worth, and how those moments, painful as they had been, had strengthened her resolve. They had shown her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to keep going despite it. Alejandro remained by her side, not just as a son, but as a steadfast partner in turning the farm into a thriving home. Together, they had created a place where justice, hard work, and love shaped every corner. They often joked about how the once proud farmer could never imagine that the little cleaning lady he had scorned would become the rightful owner of the land and a symbol of dignity reclaimed. One quiet afternoon, Maria stood on the hill overlooking the fields, the sun painting the horizon in shades of gold and crimson. She closed her eyes and felt the wind on her face, thinking of her father. "We did it, Papa," she whispered. "I kept my promise." And in the distance the farm seemed to breathe, alive with the fruits of perseverance, courage, and unwavering hope. Maria knew that her story, the struggle, the pain, and the triumph, was not just her own. It was a testament to anyone who dared to dream, to fight for what is right, and to turn adversity into strength. The farm was no longer just land. It was a living legacy, a reminder that even in the face of cruelty, injustice, and humiliation, the human spirit could rise, endure, and flourish. And as long as Maria walked its fields, the dream she had inherited, fought for, and nurtured would continue to grow, seed by seed, into something everlasting.